Week 4 with Walker Buehler. We're talking fastballs. We're talking pitch mix. We're talking some data, just some overwhelming numbers and the information that you guys are given. Also, Michael Block at the PGA. I know Walker's a big golf guy, and Yeesh's too. But first, what are we drinking, King? I got a message after you told us that we were doing Eagle Rare. Sorry, I stole it from you. But I got a message that after you said we were doing Eagle Rare, and somebody told me that it was the best bourbon they've ever had. Where are you on that?
It's up there. I think price point wise, it's certainly up there. I think it's kind of an interesting caveat, right? It's like, yeah, there's been a lot of number one picks in the draft that have been really good players, but like some of the best value guys ever, Pujols is certainly up there, Piazza, like those kind of guys. Like Buffalo Trace is that for me, where it's like $25. But Eagle Rare price point's probably like the highly touted third round pick that ends up being a really, really good player. But no, Eagle Rare is definitely one of my favorites, and probably they kind of put them in categories of like once in a while. You'll get one that's like very different tasting, and that's kind of a once in a while. Eagle Rare for me, they call it like a daily drinker. I guess it's like a daily driver for a car. Yeah. One that I never get tired of. It's kind of got the oak and the vanilla stuff that is pretty standard bourbon kind of flavor, but obviously really good and one of my favorites, and a pretty cool bottle too.
I love when we talk bourbon with you because we go through the different options, and then Buffalo Trace always comes up. It's like that's like the standard. So if Buffalo Trace is a 10, what is Eagle Rare?
Buffalo Trace is actually an 8-year, I believe. This one's age 10.
No, I mean like on a scale 1 to 10, like your favorite. Like if that's
I wouldn't say that. I have my 1A, 1B, my kind of favorites, but that's kind of the hard part. We talked last week about it kind of being like Pokemon cards for me. Like you can't always get like what your favorite ones. They're kind of hard to come by, and even with a little relationship with Buffalo Trace and another place called Michter's, which make two of my favorites, like I can't always get my favorite ones, and I got to kind of be selective on who I dole those out to. So,
gotcha.
Weller 12 is probably no doubt in the conversation for my favorite bourbon, but Buffalo Trace doesn't make many bad products, and most of their stuff, at least for a certain reason, they're all different in a little bit. Price point, alcohol level, certain flavors, the age obviously is a big part of that, but Eagle Rare is up there for sure.
I love it. Okay, so Buffalo Trace is your value pick. I love that. Third round is Eagle Rare, and the red box behind you is 1-1, like breaking the bank Dylan Cruz to Pittsburgh this year. I get it.
Yeah, that may be like a Wembanyama or whatever the guy in the NBA's name is.
What was your take on ESPN sending a guy over there for like the 2:30 a.m. interview for 40 seconds? Did you see that?
With the kid?
With Wembanyama after San Antonio won the lottery.
Oh, gee, I didn't know that. I know that they were like freaking out over there. I guess the French guys or the French nation, France and the Spurs have some sort of like connection, right? I guess because of Tony Parker.
Tony, yeah.
Exactly. Greg
I know
Popovich.
everybody was like fired up over there about that.
100%.
I thought he was talking about the hype surrounding himself, like Victor Wembanyama was, and he was like, "I'm not, surprised by it because I think I deserve it." And I was like, "That's cold-blooded," because we forget like that's a 19-year-old brain in that 7'5" guy. Like you're 19. I remember what I was thinking when I was 19, and I didn't have that level of confidence.
I guess if you don't include this year's NFL draft and go the next 3 drafts. Big professional sports, you may have 3 of like the most impressive number ones as a group, maybe ever. Maybe we should look through that and come up with like the top 5 ever. But if you're talking Cruz or Skeens, right, both are kind of seen as like generational. Then you got the quarterback from USC,
Caleb Williams, who's a Patrick Mahomes clone.
Yeah, and then this Wembanyama. I know I'm not saying that right, but
no, you got it.
Wembanyama, you got it.
All right, we got to get to these yeeshes, and I'm thinking like dramatic reading of the recent yeeshes. 3-piece yeesh, Allstate State Farm Insurance yeesh on a 3-run bomb from Mookie in a 1-0 game. Anti-yeesh for a home run robbery. Left on left yeesh,
Yep.
You're having a good time. Like, what's the deliberation process before you hit the all caps and go?
It's very, very short. Not a whole lot of deliberation.
You told me there's not a ton of thought behind those yeeshes.
No, not at all. They're just they're kind of quick off the Twitter fingers. I've never been a good tweeter at all, and it kind of it helps. It matches me because I have a basis. I just get a little creativity, and I can't really take it too far. So I've stuck with Yeesh. I thought about trying to do a different one every month. Like Oof would probably be my next one, but I think I'm going to stick with Yeesh.
But you know how the term him, like I'm him, has just been kind of thrown around for anybody. Do you think that you might be overdoing the yeeshes so the word yeesh doesn't have that same effect that it might be if you dropped it once a week? Like,
no,
that's what I'm curious about.
I think it is an uncommonly used enough word that you're not going to overbake it. You know what I mean? If there's too many people saying I'm him, there's only one him, right? Yeah. Yeesh is it's widespread enough.
Well, I would argue and say every corner and safety in the NFL and FBS college football is him. And I think they call themselves him several times. I need you to do me a favor.
Okay.
I need you to explain Michael Block to me in baseball terms. And Peter does this a lot with like other sports, right? Explain this to me in baseball terms. Michael Block is this 46-year-old that was paired with Rory McIlroy in the PGA Championship this past weekend on Sunday. And Block is like, I'm not a golf guy. I know you're a big golf guy. Like, he's what? He's a club pro.
Yep.
So what is this comparable to?
So first off, I guess I understand that because everyone thinks pro means a pro golfer, right? Yeah. A club pro is essentially the head teaching individual at any country club. And I don't know 100% what my assumption is. There's like a level of country club that you have to be at to actually be like a club professional or a member of whatever the PGA, I guess. I'm very embarrassed that I didn't remember this name because he's a Kentucky native. We did look it up. Steve Delabar is the closest baseball comp that I can think of. There might be another one out there, but he was like a high school teacher, baseball coach, did weighted balls, started throwing 100 and made an all-star team, which is wild. I guess for those of you that are movie fans, The Rookie, I believe is the name, I guess is the other kind of comp. It's pretty crazy. The wildest thing about it though is making the cut is such a big deal. And like I've gotten to talk to some of these golfer guys about that, and people don't really realize like it's not that they don't make any money when they don't make the cut. They lose money because they fly there, they put themselves up, they pay their cat, whatever. And so to make the cut is huge. To make the cut in a major is even bigger. And then he made the top 15 to the point where he gets invited back there next year. And I just saw on Twitter he got invited to the tournament next week. So that guy just went from having very little golf income, he plays like sectionals and stuff, to now he just made $300,000. He's going to go play in another tournament next week.
That's so cool.
I have another golf comp to MLB question. So Brooks Koepka ended up winning at -9, and I've seen so many interviews with Brooks. Like I remember on Pardon My Take, he was joking around about golf. I don't even know if he was actually joking, but he did say it would be cool if they could just take off 4 holes and make it a little bit shorter. He says he blacks out from holes 5 to 14. Who is a personality like that who's just so easygoing that maybe you've played with that is also incredibly talented? Like he's a guy who, is not lackadaisical is like the wrong way to describe him, but he's just, you can tell that pressure's not really getting to him, right? That he's just going.
The tough thing about him is that the aesthetic, right? He's one of the bigger looking golfers and stuff, doesn't match up with that like thought process of what you think about, right? Like you think he doesn't care, but like you have to care to go and end up making your body look like it does. And I guess especially 5 or 6 years ago when he was shredded. I don't know. I think in terms of the that lackadaisical plus talent that kind of under the surface, right, is not lackadaisical. Like it just can't be. I think Machado would probably be the closest to that. Yeah, it's interesting because Koepka is like, depending on how you look at it, you can be really hypercritical of that approach, but then you look at like the list of guys that have won 5 majors, it's all like all-timers, right? So he's put himself, it's just crazy. He's won what, like 7 tournaments or something, and 5 have been majors.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's wild.
No, I love the Machado comp because Machado was also super accomplished too. Like he's a $300+ million guy. He's made many All-Star games. He's considered one of the best third basemen of our era. So it's a very good comp like there.
Other guy I'm thinking of there is like a Robinson Cano when he was a Yankee, right? Like Cano, it was just so smooth. It was like, oh, lazy, but he got shit done. Like he was an incredible ball player.
It almost looks lazy because it's so effortless.
Right.
That's kind of the vibe that Koepka gives and Machado gives, where it's just so smooth and like he gets the back end, throws over to third base, and it looks like he's moving 10 miles an hour. When in reality, it's just he's so good he can make it look like that.
Yeah, I think the other thing on Machado is the durability, right? He plays so many games every year, and Cano by the end wasn't playing a whole lot. Obviously, probably one of those players that is as physically good and like play. We always say like, oh, he's so physically talented, and I think sometimes that's like it's almost a knock, right? Like Robinson Cano was so physically talented, like he's as good as any Hall of Fame player. He just didn't do it enough times, probably, right? Like Machado probably will end up doing it enough times that he'll probably be a Hall of Famer. Same with Koepka, he's won enough majors, right? And he stayed in majors long enough. So yeah, I like that comp. That was kind of spur of the moment, but I feel pretty good about it.
You should. I like that one.
Jumping from guys that, we're talking about that have so many accolades to guys that are trying to get, their first big league wins under their belt. Your team is running out Gavin Stone for the second time in his career and Bobby Miller for the first time in his career in Atlanta. You go Stone against Morton. You go Strider against Bobby Miller in his big league debut. And then you go Tony Gonsolin on the road against Bryce Elder, who's been pitching like he's standing on his head so far.
2.06 ERA for Elder. Just ground ball outs. That's awesome.
Crazy. So I guess overarching question, like how big is this series for these 3 arms in the LA Dodgers? And then I would love if you could kind of take us into your interactions with both Gavin and Bobby Miller.
Yeah. Obviously big for both of them. Bobby got a little slow start this year with the shoulder and was around him a lot just in the rehab process when he was getting that kid absolutely works his ass off for lack of a better term. And, I think kind of his air about him maybe would lead you to believe different about him, which I really was kind of have been convinced for a couple of years on just the work ethic and stuff. And, I'm really, really excited for him. That'll be a big velo game. It kind of in a weird way reminds me of I faced German Marquez like 3 times our rookie year in 2018, and he and I were both. He was throwing 100 at the time, and I was throwing pretty hard. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit. So that'll be a fun one. I hope it's hard for him because when he kind of cruises, it's at 100, and so 98 to 100 maybe. And so if anything goes right, if he walks a guy, everyone's going to tell him to like calm down. And I remember this distinctly because you're throwing so hard that everyone thinks you're trying too hard, right? Or you're gassed up. And like I remember my rookie year, for me, throwing harder felt more efficient and like I could actually throw better. And so I hope for him he just sticks with like doing what's comfortable to him and fills it up at 100, and I think I'll do pretty well.
So when I hear Bobby Miller comparisons, I feel like the name that comes up the most is you, right? It's not exact, there is no exact comp, but whenever I hear like, oh, Bobby Miller might be the next Walker Buehler, that's like the name that I hear the most when listening and, watching interviews about Bobby Miller. Do you see any of those comparisons there?
Yeah, I think in terms of the delivery and obviously the body, it's drastically different. Like he's a huge human and big, strong. And I just wasn't that way, especially when I was younger. But I think from the hand to the plate, it's pretty similar. He definitely has the ability to. He probably has more ability to work like the inside of the ball than I did in terms of change up and like the little two-seamer. I've always thrown a two-seamer more to change the spin. I just wanted the spin to look different. Like I throw like a 14 and 14 two-seamer at best, where he's throwing like a 18-inch run, Dustin May-ish two-seamer and a pretty good four-seamer, right? So mine was more of an optical kind of mix thing. His is like a legitimate two-seam fastball as well as his four. So, I think I had the little cutter probably a little bit earlier, and I would say I probably had a touch more command, but I don't really know. I mean, when I first came up in September of 17, I walked like 8 guys per night, so it's hard for me to really stand on that. But I think maybe I was a little more polished, but I think he probably has a little bit more ability than I had, and definitely has more of that traditional workhorse starter frame. So I know we're all excited about him.
Dodger fans hearing that Walker Buehler is saying that Bobby Miller has, a little bit more stuff than me right now is probably making them salivate at the mouth.
What's funny about the whole thing is I'm so envious of Gavin Stone too, because his change, I can't really throw a great changeup, and his is a great changeup. So in some weird form, like I know in this pitch or this route, like cutter slider, like I have a better cutter slider than Gavin Stone probably, but I'm so envious of him because he has a probably 70 changeup, right? Maybe even more than that at times. So while, I could say that these guys have better stuff, like that is my perspective because they can do certain things that I can't.
Right. Last thing on Bobby, I was calling games in Brewster out on the Cape. Were you ever out on the Cape?
Yeah, I played for YD.
For YD, okay. So
we were the first when they three-peated. I was the first year.
Okay, who else was on those teams? Like who were?
We were kind of stacked. Our rotation was me. Phil Bickford was on my team.
Damn.
Josh Stallmont was on my team.
Damn.
Cody Poteet was on my team.
Yeah.
We had a third rounder out of Illinois named Kevin Duchesne was on that team.
I remember that name.
We had a third rounder out of UCSB named Justin Hockamy.
Yep.
Yeah, we were pretty good.
Damn. I thought Bickford coming out of Fullerton was going to make the Hall of Fame. Like I thought
he got drafted ahead of me. He was doing something right.
Dude, he was throwing 99 like so young, and he had that flow, and I was just like, that's the Hall of Famer. That's what it looked like.
This is actually kind of a funny story. So that we played in Omaha. We won Omaha that year.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to the Cape till like July 7th, I think. So I made like 3 starts. I went to USA for a week, pitched 1 game with USA, came back for the playoffs. And by that time, like our school started like August 13th or something. So like August 8th, I needed to be out there. I needed to be at home for like 2 days at least.
Yeah.
So my grandmother flew up to Cape Cod and was going to drive back with me. And we stayed in this little motel there. She came to start the playoffs. She ended up having to stay there for like 12 days because we kept advancing.
Oh.
And so I pitched game 1 of the championship series at Falmouth. I think it was Falmouth, wherever Kevin Newman played. And
yeah, that might be Falmouth.
I threw pretty good. We hopped in the car and started driving home. So we were in West Virginia. I was watching the Cape Championship game on my phone while we were in West Virginia. And Bickford threw the last 2 innings. He threw 28 straight fastballs, 28 straight strikes. And I don't think a single one was below 96. He was incredible.
That's awesome.
Jeez.
So I was calling games in Brewster when Bobby was in Brewster in 2018, and I saw Bobby the next year throwing for Louisville, and then I saw him again in 21 in High A when he came to Fort Wayne, and like just seeing his body each time, I'm like, that's not the same Bobby Miller. Like that dude got massive. So really, really impressive stuff. Stone, first time we saw Stone throw for the Dodgers, he kind of had like that big league debut issue, right? Where you nibble a little bit and it, from the couch, it looked like he might have lacked some confidence, but he's got stuff that he should be really confident in. What do you feel like, he needs to improve on going into start 2?
Yeah, he's not a lack of confidence guy at all. He's a quiet kid. He's from Arkansas. Like I get along with him really well. Talk about duck hunting and stuff. And, yeah, I think the thing for him is he probably got that big adrenaline spike. And I remember, you look up in the third inning, and this guy, I've seen him in the minor leagues at 98, right? And he's throwing 91, 92 mile an hour fastballs. And I was like, kind of but you think about it, like, I think he probably got the adrenaline spike early and probably got a little tired. I think it was a day game too, which is never super easy to manage that kind of stuff. It kind of takes you a while to learn how to get enough adrenaline in a day game, and let alone sustain it, because really we're pretty trained to peak at like 7:00.
Yeah.
So for him, it's hard to you have to manufacture that adrenaline a little bit in day games.
Yeah.
To begin with, and then he just had his big league debut, going crazy. So he probably just had a little bit of that dump, and I think the second one is always significantly easier. I actually threw better in my first one than my second one, but at least mentally, the second one is a lot different than the first one.
And my last question about these two, speaking about expectations, because I'm always curious about this too, because every pitcher in their debut or in their second start, expectations for a guy down the line. We all think that Bobby Miller is going to be amazing and that Gavin Stone's going to be amazing in a couple of years. But Gavin Stone, like, what is your expectations for his next start? Like, what do you think he's thinking about? Of like, all right, even if I allow 3 runs or something, I did this successfully. And then Bobby Miller in his first start, like, what should expectations be for Dodger fans when they're watching? And then what do you think their expectations are?
Yeah, I distinctly remember the only thing you care about all this shit, right? You want to go punch out. If I get to throw 5 innings in the big, I want to punch out 15. I don't want to give up a hit and all this stuff. But at least externally, you want every one of your teammates to believe that you gave the team a chance to win, especially early in your career. That was always like the biggest thing for me. Is like, I think I don't think your teammates ever think this, but I know as a starting pitcher, for me, if I walked a bunch of guys, I always knew that I always felt more that I was like letting the team down. So for me, it was like, I want to throw strikes. I want to work quick. I want to make this so I'm not a hindrance on them in any way. Or like, you almost have that little bit of imposter syndrome where you're like, I shouldn't be here. Let me see if I can fake it enough to where they don't notice that I just made my debut. Like, that was kind of the mentality.
Real quick, when did you get over that? Like, how many starts did it take for you to get over that feeling?
I mean, it's one of those, like, we call it like taste yourself thing. But my third start, I threw in Mexico, and we threw a combined no-hitter. And I threw 6 in, and I was on a pitch count at the time, so I wasn't allowed to go over 75. And I got through 6 on 75 pitches in Mexico. And I remember thinking, like, oh, like, I can do more than just survive, was kind of the feeling.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it went really well. We didn't give up a hit, but it was 6 innings on 75 pitches. I got below that 15 per inning mark,
right,
which I think is the barrier for like surviving, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, that was like I think I can do this.
So we're gonna talk through some fastballs on video for all the people watching on YouTube. We got a couple pictures, but before we get into that, I've always just been interested in your pitch mix, right? Because you've always had this electric 4-seam fastball, but you've always thrown kind of 3 different variations of fastballs, whether that be the sinker, the cutter, and the 4-seam. Yep. And early on in your career, you were throwing, if I'm not mistaken, you were throwing a lot of sinkers. But then as the years progressed, you started throwing that cutter more. And then in 2022, it reached a career high usage at 25%. Yep. So I'm just curious, your maturation of pitches, because we talk about the mindset, but your pitch mix has changed year over year. You never see like, oh, he always throws the slider 25%. It always changes year over year. So how has that matured throughout your career?
I'm a huge. I think I've talked about this before. I'm more of a pitch to guys' weaknesses scouting guy. So my pitch mix is what it is. Like, it's not my choice or my determination. borderline just kind of trying to go to where guys. My expectation or my goal has always been to throw 5 pitches at major league average or better. Because my thought is that most guys, if I throw 5 real pitches, I can kind of go to the well on that. My fastball and a pitch. If I can find my fastball in an area and a pitch, then I feel like I have a pretty good shot. And so I've kind of tried to cover those bases with variety as opposed to, I don't think anything I throw is a 70. I don't think anything I throw is a 65. But I think I can throw 3 or 4 pitches that's 55, 60, 65 sometimes.
So some people may beg to differ that you don't.
Yeah,
have
I disagree. Your curveball. Yeah, your curveball's elite. What are we talking about here? You don't think it's 65? You're Walker Buehler. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. I wasn't calling a doubleheader on Saturday, and I saw Hendricks and Hayden Wesneski throw for Iowa. And I wanted to watch Wesneski in the pen because, obviously that guy just got optioned. He's got some stuff he's got to figure out. Like the fastball was getting hammered. Yeah. And I was watching his pen pregame, and he was more emotive than I see many starting pitchers in the pen. And I'm watching from the booth typically. I see the back and I need somebody to do cartoon shit reactions, right? Oh no, bad pitch. But watching Wesneski, I saw that he was struggling with sweeper. But he figured shit out. He went 5 no-hit innings after that by using the sweeper sparingly. When do you figure out what pitches you got? Does it take you a couple innings?
No, I think it's different for me. I think for me it's hitter to hitter to hitter to hitter, and hope it comes together, right? Or hope that the first one I throw that's not perfect I get away with. In general, to righties, I'm going to throw 4-seamers. I actually throw more 2-seamers to righties and then the sweeper slider. And then to lefties is more fastball, cutter, curveball with kind of occasional change. So I really see myself as kind of 2 different pitchers, righty to lefty. And I've kind of started incorporating TrackMan into my pregame bullpens. And I think less so to know what I have that day in terms of movement, but there's some pretty glaring numbers for me that if I feel like I threw a good changeup and it says it's this number, then it's going to be good. Yeah. And it really started with when I kind of started throwing this little changeup to check the box that, I have the decent one today. Because there's days that it's you can't go throw that. There's no point in throwing. It's not going to help you. You're probably going to get beat with it. And so we kind of had ranges of, changeup's in play today. Cool. And then I kind of found the numbers that correlate to those with my other stuff as well. And, you start leaning on stuff, but there's kind of non-negotiables too. I'm going to throw some curveballs. I'm going to throw some cutters. I'm going to throw sliders or righties, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. And that changeup is the one that I kind of no more than anything.
No, but the reason I asked, and maybe you kind of cleared it up by, what's working in the pen, but the cutter, even a few years ago, maybe not a few, more 2018, 2019, early on in your career, it was a pitch that you used 4 or 5% of the time. And in 2022, it's up to 24%. So are you in bullpens and it's just the cutter just keeps working? I'm going to keep throwing that. And then the sinker off that has died down in usage. So that's what I was curious. Was there a tangible change, or is it every single time I throw a bullpen, this cutter just keeps getting better and better, so I got to keep throwing it? It's not because I don't want to throw the sinker. How did that work?
I would say that was more the evolution of ditching the thought of trying to throw a really hard slider.
Huh.
So for a long time, I wanted the 88 mile an hour, DeGrom, Verlander, little diver off of the fastball. You see swings where they don't know that it was a slider. That's what I wanted, and I just couldn't find it. And I tried and tried and tried. And so you'll see that cutter usage goes way up as I start throwing this big, slower slider. So it's kind of all right, I can't get the one in between that I want, so I'll just throw both. And so it became more of me trying to jump cut to get lefties and then sweep to get righties.
I think it worked pretty well.
Yeah, 21, that cutter was about as good of a pitch in the big leagues, I think.
It's a decent pitch for sure.
100%. You kind of watched a revelation unfold via email when we were going back and forth this weekend, because I was like, all right, we could do like, pitch data and what you're looking at with each pitch. But then I was like, well, you know what? Maybe we could do a pitch at the end of like each time we have you on. Yeah. So today's four-seamer. And I'm very excited for this one because obviously the four-seamer is the pitch, right? It's the pitch with sex appeal in baseball. And I grabbed three guys that throw really effective four-seamers in very different ways. But I'm asking you before I pull this video up, and we're going to kind of break down Strider, Joe Ryan, and Justin Steele. What numbers, what information, what feel are you trying to get when you are throwing your four-seam fastball? Because you got a damn good four-seamer.
Yeah, I think the big thing is trying to get a certain amount of inches above average, right? And that's so I asked you for all the major league average, right? So let me see here. We have it. I don't mean to be the guy to research on whatever. No, so the average fastball, we don't have the IVB. So what I'll tell you is the average fastball when I first got in the big leagues was probably 15 and 6.
Okay.
That's like the movement
15 inches of IVB, yeah.
Right. So what that really means from player perspective is that 15 and 5 is straight.
Okay. Dead zoning, right?
That's what people associate normal or average with. So if it's an average fastball, if it's a 15 and 5, most guys will tell you that, look, it's really straight.
Okay.
So if I can add 3 inches either way, then it starts acting like it's doing stuff, right? So if I can throw 18 and 5, a hitter will say that it's jumpy. If I throw 12 and 5, they'll say it's like a dying heater, right? If it is 9 inches of run, oh, it's got some run. Like you start piecing these things together, right? And so for me, I've always been a guy that barely I throw a perceived cut. So it really is actually moving 4 inches to the right per the numbers. But when I'm my best, it's like 18 to 20 and 4. So It actually looks like it's kind of jump cutting a little bit. In reality, it's not. But the spin is not perfectly up and down like this. It's like a little cut, and it actually runs a little baby bit, but it will look like it cuts to a hitter.
So real quick, Walker Buehler got a laptop, and he's got a mouse too. I don't have a fucking mouse.
Oh, I didn't go laptop. I went big dog. I got a full-on computer.
Holy shit, man.
Oh, I got desktop. I got a.
How do you feel?
It all going. Well, they said everybody was telling me you couldn't hear anything I was saying last week, so I went big time. I invested in the podcast, and I got a little iMac.
You're flipping the bird of the haters right now, and I love it.
One more thing about the fastball before we get into some of these videos. From what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is shape, like that horizontal, the vertical movement, is that becoming more of a focus than physical velocity? Because I feel, and we're going to go over some of these fastballs, and this is why we wanted to bring some. Justin Steele throws 92 to 93. Joe Ryan's 93 to 95. Spencer Strider's, of course, 99.
Right.
But if you have a 93 mile an hour fastball with 20 and 5, that seems much better than a 97 mile an hour fastball that's 15 and 5. Right. So
I should have told you guys to put Rich Hill on this thing. We can go through Rich Hill's mix at some point. But he's the example of it, right? It's 86, but it's probably still 21 and 4 or 21 and 10. Like it's a special thing that he can do. And also, people don't really understand velocity helps you. It makes inverted breaks so much easier to get. Like there's a normal assumption that if a guy's throwing 100, it's going to be jumpy. Like it's just the assumption, right? And the hitter's eyes know that. Right. So if you throw 100 at 16, it's straight. If you throw 90 at 17, it's got something to it because 90 miles an hour should actually really be, 14, not 16. You know, whatever it is, the averages would go down as velocity goes down.
Yeah.
So so all you're trying to do is get away from average.
I'm excited to talk sinker with you because there are a couple guys that I want to hit on, like Logan Webb and Fromber, but like I want to talk Gratterall too, because that kind of like goes against what we're talking about, right? Where it's hard as hell, but I mean it's a bowling ball. So I find that very interesting. But let's jump into the video.
The least qualified guy in the world to talk about sinkers. So
hey, we're still gonna pick your brain about it, man.
We'll try.
Make it till you make it. But we'll end with some video here. I'm going to share my screen here. And again, this is awesome on YouTube. If you haven't watched our pitcher hitter sequence breakdowns, we did Buehler against Posey, we did Cole against Buxton, and then we did Fromber against Mike Trout. And those were freaking gold. So
I thought those came out pretty cool. I haven't heard a whole lot of feedback on it, but I thought it was pretty cool.
100%. I got some messages that it was like some of the coolest shit that a couple of my baseball like work friends have ingested.
We're trying to go a little hardcore in here. This isn't a fluffy thing. We're trying to go hardcore stuff on here.
Let's nerd out, Chief. So let's start with Strider's fastball here. So Strider, obviously everybody looks at the fastball and they see Quadzilla and they see 99 at your face. But I'm starting here with Adolis Garcia, and he goes 97 low. And I want you to tell me why this four-seamer is as effective as it is.
Okay, so the one at the bottom, right? Well, like we can tell everyone his heater's got the jump and the rise or the inverted vertical, right? So the ones at the bottom, that hitter has to like essentially teach himself through an at bat or a game that the ball that looks like it's going to hit the ground is going to be a strike. So he's going to get a lot of swings like this where it's late because there's that little bit of hesitation where the hitter has to tell himself that what he's seeing is incorrect.
That's crazy.
Right? So he can throw this ball right down the middle a lot of times, and he's going to get late swing. Like, I don't think Garcia has a whole lot of issue with velocity, right?
No.
But that's not normal velocity.
No, I mean, that's 97. And if you're expecting that to end up so much lower than it actually is, you're probably screwed, right?
Yeah. To me, that has less to do with the velocity and more to do with that it's at the bottom.
Got you.
And we talk about that break. So let's say, what was that on the gun, Jack? Was that 97?
97.
Yeah.
So what does that look like in the box? Because it has to look like 103 or something.
I think it's less the velocity number. It's literally just the angle out of the hand.
Huh.
So I face some of these guys that throw really, really hard that don't jump it, and then I face guys that do jump it. And like for instance, Scherzer threw me an 0-0 fastball the first time I ever faced Scherzer. It was right down the middle. I think he might have thrown like a little. He doesn't really throw two seamers, but I think some balls he really tries to get on and some he doesn't. And it didn't look very hard. It's like in my head, I was like, that was probably like 93. I looked up, it was 96. Then he threw me slider, heater up. And I swung and missed the heater up, barely saw it. And I could have sworn to you it was 100 miles an hour. And I looked up and it was 96.
Yeah.
So certain launching, like the angle that the ball comes out, all of that stuff factors into it. But a guy like this where the release height is not low, it's probably around league average because it's pretty over the top. And I think he hides the ball pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
Pause it right there. And go back like 2 frames.
Yeah, let me scrub a little bit. Right.
So he's kind of like, keep going. Like he's probably not seeing that ball until now. So like, he hides it pretty good.
That's already
it's just
on
a
here.
clean arm stroke and it's firm. It spins good. And I actually like throwing the ball. I think guys that invert, jump the ball, I think we're actually losing throwing the ball down a little bit. I still really don't. I don't really try and throw the ball up that much.
Yeah.
I think the up inverted heater, like, the relievers, like that's fine. But if you're a starting pitcher and you're trying to get through a thing 3 times, it's hard to throw the fastball like this high all the time. And I think, if you do that for too long, I think it can mess with the way you throw the ball because you're always trying to be like, this inverted break comes from trying to throw the ball hard as shit down and spin it to keep it up, right? And so when you practice this up heater all the time, you're never going to get like the repetitions of spinning it like that.
Right.
And
So
just
I like guys that still try and go down, even though they're jumping it.
Just to build on that point too, I feel like in this era of baseball, when everyone is trying to go consistently up, hitters in the box, they know that this guy's got a fastball that's going to jump out the gym, right? So
that plugs into the calculation of average too, right?
Yeah.
Whatever the numbers say, if everyone's doing the same thing, even exceptional ones will start to look more average.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
So
you want to zig, not zag, when everyone else is zagging.
Right. We're talking, we're hitting like knee high. And listen, we just talked location. There's a reason they play well up, right? Like that just takes off like a rocket ship on
yeah, then he does that shit.
But you can't tell me that throw looks exactly like the one down, right?
Mm-hmm.
That looks – so I remember still to this day, if I want to throw the ball high, I don't ever aim there. I just try and throw it too hard. I try and throw it harder because I'm going to fly, right? And so you'll see like this ball has so much more run than the first one, at least to the naked eye. And it's different angles and whatever. But that's a bolt, right? That's straight.
Right.
This one looks like it's doing this.
Right.
So
yeah, that almost
like I prefer that kind of difference because you throw it too hard, your arm's late, and then you get more run, but you're still getting the jump. And so that was how I learned how to throw the up heater, was just try and throw it too hard.
Interesting. Huh. That's fascinating. All right. So this guy, he boggles the mind of so many baseball fans, right? And Joe Ryan was like 89 to 91 at points last year. He's 93 to 95 so far.
But let's go this ball that's hit.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely insane. This is 93 Bayou. This is 93 belt high Bayou. These are two of his last fastballs against the Angels. This is a little bit later in the game. He's getting Urshela to swing through that. That's 93.
Pause it at release for me.
Yeah.
This is the number one fastball in Major League Baseball by run value. There's no one who's at negative 12 except for Joe Ryan right now.
Right there. So if you look at how low this is in comparison, if you're looking at this and you could imagine you're from the side of this and take the mound out of it, this ball's below the hitter's shoulder.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you sunk him below the mound, sunk him down there, that ball's below his shoulder. So he's releasing his ball at probably 5 feet.
Dude.
And then you add the mound. So this is the other way people don't – it looks like it's jumping. Like he's got 13 inches the mound or 14 – I don't even know the mound. But say he's releasing it at 5 foot off the mound. This hitter's 6 foot tall, and that ball ends up 60% of his height. So this is one of the jumpier fastballs from a lower release in baseball.
I mean,
and it's ending at 4 feet 6 inches off the ground.
Just watching this thing in slow-mo, you see it rising out of his hand because of how low.
That's what I'm trying to explain is that this ball is going down because he's releasing it at 5 feet and it's ending at 4 foot 6. If this hitter's 6 foot tall, right?
Yeah.
It's just that's the optical. Like hitters feel that too, but that low release with jump, Scherzer has done it his whole career. That's what makes Scherzer so special.
And then
he's releasing the ball from so low and it just stays.
And then that's why the splitter is so good for Ryan too, because it's it looks like the fastball, then it just drops off. So you have two different complete directions. One's jumping out the gym and the other one is falling off the table, but he's both throwing it from the same arm slot. It's got the same arm speed and it's just, you don't know what to do. But that's why I was talking about velocity versus shape. Joe Ryan, you wouldn't expect at 93 miles an hour has the number one fastball in Major League Baseball. And I'm sure more teams are looking for the next Joe Ryan instead of the guy who just throws 100 miles an hour. So he's one of the most fascinating pitchers in Major League Baseball because of that.
I think that point is wholeheartedly incorrect, but that's just me. Everyone wants velocity, and that just is what it is.
Yeah.
But this low slot with rise is probably the least velocity dependent throw.
Do you really think that teams are looking well more for velocity than that shape? Like, you think teams would
Go look for
way
the side
rather?
for the most money.
What'd you say?
You ever seen a guy throwing 93 go first in the draft?
Good point.
It's a good point.
Like Skeens is
You
99.
like
right?
Skeens because he throws slow, or you like him because he throws hard, right? Like some of this stuff can be taught. Arm speed is one of the hardest things to teach.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you'll see in any draft. We were talking about Wemby, like there's just not people built like him, right?
Mm-hmm.
If he could barely shoot, he'd still be the number one pick.
Right.
They can teach him to shoot. They can't teach him to be 7'5".
That's actually a really good point, because you can't teach the velocity. Can you teach that shape?
You can help that shape, but you can't help velocity at arm slots. I get what you're saying, and I understand there's a lot of successful guys throwing from low slot, and that's the DeGrom thing, right? DeGrom is pretty low, and he throws 100.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's 21. Like that's why it's different.
Right.
That makes more sense, because you can't teach.
This is a weird kind of different. And I've got a comp on this fastball, which you guys are not going to realize until I say it.
I'm in. All right. This is Justin Steele, lefty for the Cubs, who's been a freak of all freaks since last All-Star break. And he's got Trey Turner flinging a bat down the third base line on 92, elevated. And then here he's got Jeremy Pena, who I think has like a really interesting timing mechanism. And that's
I would like for you to go back to both of them and watch how different the movement looks.
Okay.
So watch this one. This looks like it's going straight right, doesn't it? It almost looks like a slider.
Yeah, it looks like it's cutting or sliding. And now we get Pena.
Yeah, that fastball looks like it's starting on the left-handed batter's box, and then it's going all the way inside, when that one is just straight jumping.
But it's got a little cut. Right?
Yeah.
So
Teensy bit.
Yeah, it even looks out of the arm like it's cutting.
those are the same throw. So this is one thing that's really hard, is on different camera angles, these things look crazy different.
Right. This one's probably a little bit easier to ingest because it's more straight on, right?
Yeah. Houston makes a lot of balls look like they do crazy stuff. Texas makes balls look like they do crazy stuff. The higher and more center, you'll see like some weird stuff happen.
Got you.
Everything looks pretty flat in Philly. But it looks like it cuts a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I've got two comps on this. Julio Urias does this.
Okay.
Where it's a baby cut. But Julio kind of knows what it's doing. He's not intentionally cutting it, but some of them cut more than others, and they kind of stay like that for the day. This guy reminds me so much of Max Fried. Where the more glove side it gets, the more it cuts. So you'll see. God, my voice is horrible. I got allergies out here bad right now.
I got allergies too, man. I get it.
You watch Fried. When Fried goes arm side, the ball's straight. When Fried goes glove side, it cuts like 5 inches. And it's just kind of like a sliding scale to get over that. This guy reminds me of that a lot. And it makes it's tough.
It's so funny, because Max Fried can touch. I mean, I've seen him touch 98 miles an hour. And yet I see what you're saying, though.
Oh, it's a real thing. But Fried has also been very successful in certain. I've watched him at 91, 94.
Exactly.